Hello and welcome, I'm Sarah and this is a short video on a few health hacks to help you optimise your life. So it's more for a newbie who's just starting out with biohacking or keto or fasting and such like. So it's going to include a little bit about our ancestors, about fasting, about some food choices, coffee, sleep and gut health. So I hope you find it useful. So this is a little talk on perform in the day and sleep at night. So it's some basic biohacking or life optimizing tips which I've been sharing with people in different companies. So I thought I'd make a video out of it for anybody that's interested. So for people who don't know me, I'm Sarah and I'm a biochemist. And I'm also a hypnotist and I've done stage hypnosis and I teach movement and I work doing functional neurology with people as well. And I've kept up with the biochemistry since leaving research, and I found that I've learned more, well, I learn more every year studying on my own and trying out different supplements and things than I did in a whole degree. And I've just finished writing a book, which was why I haven't made any videos for ages, and it started off on brain supplements and smart drugs or nootropics, but then I decided to add the psychedelics in as well because the book's research based, so I've gone for the human studies and the randomised clinical controlled studies when I can, but anything else that's of interest. But then, because it got quite biochemical, I thought I would include the psychedelics, particularly because there are lots of them being used therapeutically now, so it is important to understand how they work, because even though they're meant to be used in medical settings, people will get curious or be desperate and then want to try them themselves. So it is better to understand how they work. So the outline of today's talk is some health tips which I hope you'll find useful. So I'll start off talking a bit about what our ancestors did, because that's important, because it's very different to the environment we live in today. Then we'll talk about body clocks or circadian rhythms. I'll introduce you to a few hormones that are important in case I mention them in the talk and you don't know what they are. I'll talk about sleep and how to get better sleep. A little bit about the benefits of fasting and the top 3 foods to avoid. And then finally finishing off with gut health and coffee. So our ancestors lived in a completely different environment to us, and they pretty much ate whole foods and nothing processed. They had time with no food, so had to fast. So we didn't die out, therefore fasting isn't something that's going to kill you or dangerous. And also our body can make some really interesting biochemical adaptations during times when we don't have food, which are very useful to help with health issues and other things these days. Our ancestors spent lots of time outside and were physically active, so we're all pretty comfortable that being active is a good thing. There are certain issues now about sun cream and whether it is actually a good thing or not, because now there are lots of issues coming up with vitamin D deficiency, and in certain countries like the UK, people are vitamin D deficient already. So that's the vitamin D sulfate that comes from the sun. It's different to the vitamin D3 that comes as a supplement. Another important thing about our ancestors were we lived in social groups and lots of human contact, whereas nowadays lots gets done over the internet and we've got the problems of social media and all that brings, but also all the joys of social media and the internet as well. Now our ancestors didn't have electricity, so this is relevant for EMF or problems with EMFs, which is to do with being surrounded by electronic devices and Wi-Fi, and we don't actually know the full effects of these on our health. Also, our ancestors didn't really have to worry about pollution or chemicals. Things like mercury and arsenic and lead and things like that, they were around, but all of the new things like plastics and chemicals and pesticides, we didn't have to deal with them. So in the talk I'll maybe mention a few hormones as we're going through. So just thyroid hormone's the accelerator pedal of the body, so it can control the metabolism. The cortisol and adrenaline, they're called stress hormones, but in terms of what they do, we can think of them as sort of the gears of the body, and also they're important in waking us up or getting ready to do something. Insulin is a storage and growth hormone. Melatonin is a hormone for going to sleep. Growth hormone is for repairing and rejuvenating. Mitochondria are something inside the cells which make energy, so obviously that's a good thing because we want energy. And autophagy is something that happens during times when we fast, and this is where the body will break down old and damaged, malfunctioning precancerous cells and use them as energy. So it's sort of like spring cleaning the body. So body clocks or circadian rhythms in general look a bit like this, although there are variations from person to person. So not everybody has a body clock that obeys these exact times, and there are different sort of subtypes. Like the obvious one would be larks and owls, of people who like to go to bed and get up late versus people that go to bed early and get up early. But there are also other variations in body clocks like wolves and bears, but we won't go into that in too much detail right now because it's something to make another video on at a later date. So in general, as you can see, when we wake up in the morning, there's a rise in cortisol and blood pressure. Things start to get going, the intestines start moving, there's the most secretion of testosterone in the morning. Then we get to the afternoon around about 2:30. This is when reaction time and coordination is at its best. So this can be important if you are an athlete or play professional sport or need to do something complicated at this particular time. Then around about 5 o'clock-ish, that's when muscle strength is most effective. So these timings would dictate when it would be the best time to do different exercises or types of exercise. Then around about 8 o'clock, melatonin, the going to sleep hormone, starts to be produced. Now, melatonin is quite interesting. It does lots of things while you're asleep, but also one thing it does is it quietens down the pancreas, so people get a little bit insulin resistant in the evening. But also coinciding with that, the intestinal movements start to stop. So this would suggest that eating before bed isn't a good thing, and new research is starting to show that as well, that it can disturb your night's sleep, the food doesn't get digested properly, and there are other consequences which are not useful. So because we've got these Stone Age genetics living in this modern day society, there are lots of problems which have emerged, and we're fortunate that we've got rid of infectious diseases, particularly in the West. So there are a whole host of new things that have come along. So we've got obesity, insomnia, type 2 diabetes, pain, gut issues, fatigue, anxiety, depression, autoimmune disease and stress. So I work a lot with different people, and these I would say would be the top things which they complain about. So first of all, lack of sleep is something that people really underestimate how bad it is, and lots of new research is showing that bad sleep is as bad as being inactive or eating bad food. Poor sleep is linked to diabetes, insulin resistance, weight issues, weakened immune system, depression, anxiety, cardiovascular disease and cancer, so some of those new diseases that are on the list. What can you do about this? So it does come down to some extent working with your body clock. So when you get up in the morning, if you can get 10 to 15 minutes outside with the sunlight in your eyes and on your skin, obviously if you can get more, that's even better. So you sort of set your body clock right at the beginning of the day. If you work at a computer a lot or on your phone or with screens a lot through the day, it's a good idea to use some blue blocking lenses, but inside, not outside, because you do need the light from the sun. So wearing the orange lenses all day outside as well can also mess up your body clock. When it starts to get later in the evening, it's a good idea to avoid doing your supermarket shopping very late. So that would be like after 8 o'clock, because it's so bright there, it can disturb your body clock when you're trying to get to sleep or get ready to go to sleep. And also another thing would be avoiding blue lights and computer screens and things like that about 2 hours before bed. It's because your brain makes melatonin before going to bed, and the blue light interferes with this process, but it doesn't just stop you going to sleep, it actually affects the quality of the sleep you have during the night. So when it comes to sleep aids, there's something I've left off here which would be a sleep monitor. So that would be something like an Oura ring, or you can get watches which tell you how much you're sleeping and what kind of sleep you're getting. So it's the deep sleep that researchers believe is the most important at the moment. So some people find having a cold shower before bed is something that's helpful for getting to sleep. Then, as I said before, avoid eating 2 to 3 hours before bed. Make sure the bedroom's dark and no electronic devices are on, because for some people who are sensitive to light, even the lights from the devices can keep them awake or disturb their sleep. But also, again, back to the EMFs that are emitted by devices, particularly iPhones and iPads, things that can connect to Wi-Fi, that can affect people's sleep. But also we don't really know the full effects of Wi-Fi on the brain yet, so it's a good idea to have them out of the room. And blacking out the room is a good idea as well, so that could be making sure there's no light creeping in around the windows and stuff like that. So that's mainly for people who do really struggle to get to sleep. Then you can try something called an acupressure mat in bed, which is sort of like a bed of nails. So you lie on it in the bed, and it prickles you, and it's uncomfortable in the beginning, but as your body starts to make its own natural pain-killing substances like enkephalins and endorphins, these particular compounds help people to become relaxed and to go to sleep more easily. And also lots of people report that they get better sleep. Liposomal melatonin supplement can be helpful, and the liposomal version is much better than the powders or the tablets, I've found. So the only issue or thing you have to bear in mind with this type of supplement is that you don't want to take it all the time, because your body makes melatonin itself. When you take a hormone of any kind, your body can sometimes stop making its own. So there's no studies done on this. It's just with any supplement you should always have breaks from it. Then, like I mentioned before, you can invest in some blue blocking glasses. So the orange and yellow ones are for use in the daytime, and the red ones are for before bed. So lots of people use them about 2 hours before bed, and the red ones block out all light, so you can still see, but according to your brain you're in complete darkness. And this is also for people that need to do things on the computer at night. So when it comes to the blue blocking glasses, I've used the True Darks and the Biohackers Collective, though I've heard that Blue Blocks are a good brand as well. Something else which is a problem is eating too much and eating too often, or both. So they've done some studies on how often people eat, and it ranged from twice a day to 10 times a day. So you definitely don't need to be eating that often, because the problem with that is the more often you eat, you're spiking or raising your insulin, which is a growth and storage hormone. So if you have weight issues or any concerns about diabetes, you don't want to be in growth and storage mode all the time. And also, when it comes to growth mode, it doesn't just grow healthy cells, there's potential to grow unwanted cells like cancer as well. So when it comes to fasting, it's actually very complicated, the biochemistry of fasting, of what actually happens when you fast. So most of it's mediated by this protein here called AMPK. So when you fast, and to some extent exercise or take certain nutraceuticals or drugs like metformin or berberine, curcumin, resveratrol, it activates AMPK. Fasting does it the most because AMPK is a nutrient sensing protein. So in the absence of any nutrients, this protein gets switched on. It does lots of things. So it can heal things like leaky gut and leaky blood-brain barrier, things like that, because it tightens up, we'll say, the biochemistry of the body. And leaky gut is where there are little gaps in the lining of the gut, and things can get in and get through, causing health problems, allergies, brain fog, all sorts. Also, when you fast, it encourages new mitochondria to be made, which is useful. We obviously want more mitochondria for energy. It inhibits something called mTOR, which is the body's main growth sort of pathway. So mTOR isn't bad, it's just you don't want mTOR on all the time, because you want to have times when mTOR's off. So the body grows or repairs when it's appropriate, and then it does catabolic or breaking down activities like autophagy at other times. So again, for autophagy, this is where this body breaks down old and damaged cells and organelles to make way for new ones. And also, if you're fasting, it breaks these down to use energy and get sort of amino acids and proteins. The fasting biochemistry is very closely linked to the detox biochemistry. So this means when you're fasting, your body is better at starting to remove toxins and heavy metals and plastics and things. The other thing that happens during fasting, but also ketogenic diets where you take away the carbohydrates, is that the body's more likely to go into ketosis, or will go into ketosis if you fast for long enough, and this is where fat is burnt for fuel. And again, that's something that some people are after, but also the ketones that are produced themselves have useful properties, like they're anti-inflammatory and they suppress appetite. And AMPK also inhibits fat storage, which is something that's, again, of use for some people, and also switches on anti-aging genes. So there are lots of different kinds and lengths of fast which do different things, but for basic fasting routines, for people who've just got interested in this and want to start, a lot of people start with 16-8, so that would be 2 meals a day, or a 16-hour fast with an 8-hour eating window. So the 2 meals a day can be breakfast and lunch and then no dinner, or it can be no breakfast and then lunch, or late lunch and then dinner. The other option that people find quite easy to do when they're starting would be doing a 24-hour fast once a week. So if it's quite a short fast, you may not need to make up any electrolytes. So these are just sort of natural salts in the body, because you don't want them to go out of balance when you're fasting, because it'll just cause unwanted side effects. So when I make up electrolytes, I use potassium, sodium and magnesium. So potassium is quite easy to buy. It comes as the new salt or low salt, depending on which country you're in. I've stopped using bicarbonate of soda when I make electrolytes, just because I think it can affect the gut pH and the gut bacteria adversely. So I've just done some experiments not using it, and it didn't make me feel any worse or better. But looking into it, I've decided to leave it out, although for some people they find it very helpful. During a fast, it's not a good idea to drink too much black tea or black coffee, just because of the caffeine, as fasting in itself can be inherently stressful. Not massively stressful, but if people then add in too much caffeine on top, it can become unpleasant as well, so it makes people want to break the fast. And then keeping busy is important to prevent yourself thinking about food. So it's that saying about the stomach, so it's, "Dear stomach, you're not hungry, you're bored, now shut up." And exercise is completely fine during fasting. If it's a short fast, then pretty much your usual routine will be okay. So moderate exercise is fine. For longer fasts, it wouldn't be sensible to do a huge CrossFit workout or a huge weights workout, but other activities are fine. So for people who really are not quite ready to start anything like a keto diet or a carnivore diet or fasting, but want to start making health changes, the 3 worst food choices I would say are, number 1 would be cheap vegetable oils or omega-6s, such as canola, soybean, sunflower, corn oil, grapeseed, margarine. Margarine is probably one of the worst, because these oils are very inflammatory, so they irritate lots and lots of cells and things inside the body. And also the fats get oxidized really easily, and then these fats then go around and damage other fats in the body, including cholesterol. So when you heat these vegetable oils, because they're not very stable anyway, this makes them even more inflammatory, so that would be sort of fried foods or baking with them. Another thing which pretty much everyone is okay with is that high sugar foods are bad, because they cause sort of blood sugar roller coasters. It causes large surges in insulin. Again, like I was saying earlier, it's a storage and growth hormone, and having a lot of it around all the time is not good. And sugar as well can be inflammatory, and there are other things which sugar does as well, such as it can adversely affect how the immune system functions, and also things in the gut. Another reason to avoid it is it's got no nutrients whatsoever, so you want to be aiming for getting foods that have got lots and lots of nutrients and goodness per calorie, so things like eggs and salmon and organ meat and liver, things like that. And also eating foods with lots of fat and lots of sugar together. So there's a thing in biochemistry called the Randle cycle, which says that sugar and fat reciprocally inhibit each other. So that just means you can't burn fat and sugar at the same time. The cells can accept one or the other. So when you try and put both in together, it creates sort of a problem. But it's also inflammatory as well when you have this situation going on in the body. And inflammation is a really good environment for fat cells to grow and develop. So that's something, again, for people who are interested in weight loss, that would be something to consider. But most people know that the bad foods, which would be cakes and biscuits and ice cream and chocolate and crisps, are the ones that have got lots of fat. But also refined carbs would come into this as well together. So there's a lot of talk around about the gut microbiome and the gut-brain connection. So we're aware of it, but nobody really knows it in detail, even though there are plenty of people out there trying to sell you gut microbiome kits or probiotics and claiming to be experts in it. It's still a very new area of science, but it's something really important. We are outnumbered in our cells by something, I think it's 5-to-1 bacteria versus our own cells, more if you include the mitochondria. But also there are microbiomes in the skin, the blood, the brain, the mouth and other orifices, and they're all important as well. The blood microbiome is something that's very new, and that's to do with different kinds of organisms living in the blood, some helpful, some not helpful. And of course we want the microbiome in the skin to be healthy, which is why it's not a good idea to sort of be constantly stripping the skin with harsh cosmetics. And also washing too much actually makes it more difficult for your skin to make vitamin D as well. So antibiotic overuse is obviously the worst thing for the gut bacteria or the gut microbiome, because you wipe out a lot of the diversity, and then you end up with not a wide variety of species of bacteria, just a few, and this can lead to lots of problems. Also, alcohol is probably the second worst because it causes leaky gut, because in animal studies, when they want to make a mouse or a rat or a rabbit model of leaky gut, they give the animals vodka to create leaky gut. Carrageenan again is something pretty bad. So it comes from a certain seaweed, and it's a thickener, and you find it in yogurts and protein drinks, kind of desserts. You have to read the labels sometimes because they sneak it in. So this is another reason to eat proper food, not just stuff in jars and packets, because there's all sorts of things in there that aren't good. But carrageenan is something to look out for and avoid. The other problem is when people want to be healthy is they start eating loads and loads and loads and loads of insoluble fibre, which comes from certain kinds of leafy vegetables, and not enough soluble fibre, which comes from other sources. So you can think of the insoluble fibre like cars, that when you have a traffic jam, the worst thing you can do with a traffic jam is try and send more cars into the traffic jam. It doesn't make it go through the traffic lights or the roundabout or whatever quicker. That's the same with the gut, and there's research coming out now about eating too much fibre. So it's one of these things that something that might be helpful in a sensible amount is fine, but more isn't better. Too much sugar can feed yeast, and so you can get sort of candida overgrowths where you end up with sort of yeast-based problems in the body, and there are lots of candida diets to follow, and most of them involve removing sugar and fruit and things like that yeast like. But it is much easier just to go sort of keto or low carb or carnivore, because it's less complicated, and the yeast are not going to like that kind of diet. Fasting is really helpful for the gut because it gives it a chance to heal, because it has a rest, because there's no food to digest, because digesting food in itself is inherently inflammatory and an effort for the gut. So it is good to have a break. This is true as well for the microbiome in the mouth. It's good to have no food in there for a while, just to give the microbiome a chance to stabilise, because it plays a role in protecting the teeth and other things. I won't go into this in detail now. Because we're thinking about the gut microbiome being a good thing, companies and people interested in money, of course, try and jump on this bandwagon and sell people probiotics, which are sort of bacteria in a pill. And I worked with the bacteria for probably 10 years, and they don't really like going in the freezer when you put them in their own media with glycerol. And some of them don't really like going in the fridge. So trying to freeze dry them in a capsule and then expect them to survive is a big ask. So a lot of these probiotics that people sell, lots of the bacteria are found not to be alive when people have tried to culture them on agar plates or bacterial media. Also, the kinds of bacteria that they say are in the weaker ones tend not to be there, so the bacteria you're getting, or they say are getting, that isn't right either. To get around this problem, they tend to try and use bacillus species, which are spore formers. So these bacteria can make a spore which is very resistant. And interestingly, anthrax is one of those bacteria that can make spores and survive all kinds of harsh environments. And then what happens then is, because the spore forming bacteria are sort of like the Navy SEALs or the SAS, that when they get in the gut and they can survive anything, they end up taking over the gut. So people end up with an imbalanced gut from taking their own probiotics. So they feel better at the beginning, but then they feel worse later. So it's worth looking into live or fermented foods such as kefir, sauerkraut and kombucha, but you need to make sure that they haven't been pasteurised, because that means they're useless, because everything in there is being killed. So it's very common now for people to start to make their own or buy from a reputable place which can guarantee that their food's alive. So something else which is helpful would be to consider some digestive enzymes. So these are a mixture of enzymes that can break down proteins and fats and fibre and other things. It depends on the blend that you've got, and this helps the food to be digested more quickly and more efficiently, so you can get more nutrients out of your food, and also it tends to speed up the digestion process, making it easier for the gut. So the brand I use, and is currently probably one of the best, is Masszyme by Biooptimizers, because as people get older they start to make less stomach acid and less enzymes, so it's more helpful for older people. So that older, unfortunately, is probably over 35. That's when theoretically, biologically, things start to decline. But also for people who are very athletic or into bodybuilding or powerlifting and need lots and lots of calories, and they want to get every last little bit of nutrient out of their food. And they also, because they want to train, they want the food not to be hanging around for ages. So when it comes to coffee, this is something that I see all the time on forums and things, and it does make me laugh, because people ask, am I allowed coffee? But the thing is, you don't need to ask anybody what you're allowed to do. Either do your own research, or if you really love coffee, then have coffee. It doesn't matter what other people say or think. It's up to you. And there are benefits to coffee, and obviously there are disadvantages to coffee. However, for now we'll just say that we are having coffee. So it's better to wait till after 9:30 a.m. to have your first cup, because this is when your cortisol levels have dropped. So the cortisol peaks at around about 6:30, and then it's dropped down again at around about 9:30. So it's there to wake you up in the morning and get you going. So you don't really want to add in another stimulant on top, because that can give people the jitters or sort of overexcite the sympathetic nervous system, and people can actually start to feel a little bit stressed. Also, it can raise blood sugar, which is not useful for certain people who are wanting to manage blood sugar, people who are pre-diabetic. Also, probably 2 to 3 cups a day, so that it doesn't interfere with your sleep, because the half-life on average for caffeine is about 6 hours, but it does vary from person to person. Some people metabolize it much quicker, but just to be on the safe side, it is better not to have it late in the evening. Now, I like adding L-theanine to coffee. So L-theanine is a compound that comes from green tea. I didn't really think much of it until I wrote my book on nootropics, and I looked up pretty much everything that was in different ingredients. And L-theanine does lots of really interesting things, and when it comes to adding it to coffee, it sort of balances with the caffeine, so it gives people a calm and focused feeling. So it's not a sedative, it's almost like a nootropic, so people use it for improving cognition. It can also do other interesting things, which I won't go into now, but there was a paper that I found showing it can help with some of the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. When it comes to choosing coffee, it is better to buy good quality organic coffee and support your local roasting business rather than going to Starbucks. And some people are sensitive to mold toxins or want to avoid them, and you can buy coffee that is certified mold-free, and there are several brands, not just Bulletproof Coffee, that are certified mold-free, but also it does tend to relate to when the beans were picked and roasted. So if it's quite a quick turnaround time, that the beans, say, arrive in your local area on Monday and they get roasted that day, and then you buy the beans on Tuesday, the chances are that they haven't been left hanging around somewhere like in a big warehouse for months, where mold could start to grow. So again, that's another reason to buy from kind of local roasters, because you can find out when the beans were roasted. So Bulletproof Coffee is something which is getting popular, and it's basically good quality coffee with MCT oil, which is medium chain triglyceride. So it's a bit like a ketone. So it doesn't get stored as fat, but it helps give people energy. And lots of people add grass-fed butter to the coffee as well and blend it up in a blender. And the grass-fed butter has got omega-3s in it, fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin K. So, and also it's an alternative for some people to milk because there's quite a lot of sugar in milk. If people don't tolerate dairy at all, they sometimes tolerate ghee, which is clarified butter. If people are vegan or vegetarian, then obviously you can use coconut oil instead. MCT oil, it comes from coconut oil. So that's enough for today. So hopefully I'll be making some more videos soon. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully be able to make a video again soon. Thanks, bye.